final if you all want to share one final embrace.
After a roller coaster of a season, Matt James's journey has come to an end. We're unpacking everything that happened in the finale and after the final rose. Hey guys, welcome back to another Shared News from Home. We made it. The finale was finally here. We are so excited to dive into it. But before we get started, if you're new here, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. As always, I'm your host, Fiona Zaring, and I'm joined by the wonderful Avery Grooms and Hibba Berry. You guys, we have been waiting for this moment for such a long time. I just want to get right into it because there's a lot to talk about. Obviously, we saw Matt's journey end where he breaks up with Michelle. It was heartbreaking. It was very emotional on both sides. I know we were expecting it, but what did you think when it was playing out, Avery?
I wasn't expecting it to end the way it did, but I also was anticipating that. It kind of seemed abrupt, but at the end of the day, how else was he going to put it? You know, he knew it was going to have to come to an end at some point. It was just sad to see it unfold that way. You know, she was showing him all these gifts, and it was getting really deep, and then it just turned into we're done. And it was sad. It was sad to see her go, but I was anticipating it coming. I wasn't really shocked by it. He definitely could have handled it differently, but I'm not going to judge because in a moment like that, it's really hard. And like he had to end it at some point and it just came out that way. But I was anticipating it to go some way in that direction. What about you, Hiba?
The anticipation was certainly there, just waiting for when this breakup would kind of play out in the episode because we knew it was gonna come, but when? And unfortunately, Matt just chose a really bad time to do it, but there's no best way to do it. He just kind of had to rip off the band-aid and he kept saying, if I actually care for her, I have to tell her this. And he did, he went about it and he stayed true to his word of he didn't want to waste her time if he wasn't as invested as she was. I mean, like you mentioned, Avery, she was showing jerseys she had picked out for both of them. So she was ready. She was ready to go, ready to be engaged. And Matt still had his second doubts, which is totally normal and totally fine. But yeah, it was just really, really hard to watch and uncomfortable. But hopefully we'll see a happy ending for Michelle later on in this year with her own season. But yeah, it was just a really hard watch overall.
Yeah, I am with you both. My heart broke for Michelle, but as you mentioned, Hibba, there is light at the end of the tunnel, which we will, of course, get into later. In the meantime, what happens next? He chose Rachael. No surprises there, but he did choose not to propose, which is something that I think some people were anticipating, depending on if you kept up with spoilers or not. But that was one of the things I wasn't sure about. I thought he might get down on one knee. Were you guys surprised? With when push came to shove, he was not ready. He did not choose to propose and leave the show engaged. Hibba, what were you thinking?
I thought that he was gonna propose. I thought he was gonna go all the way, but it seems like past kind of relationships with his father and the way he grew up really messed with his head and stuck in his head and kind of made him not obviously want to propose or get engaged. And it was weird because he did have the ring, he went through that whole process of selecting a ring with Neil Lane, meeting with him, having that conversation. But it just seemed like still at the very last second, very last minute, he still was not ready. And it just wasn't meant to be at that point an engagement. But it seemed like, he still walked away with a solid relationship, boyfriend and girlfriend with her. But yeah, proposal, I was expecting that because we got so much hype for this finale to end with a proposal, and we knew it was going to be Rachael. Rachael was still kind of like pending. We weren't for sure, like you said, there were a lot of spoilers. I was her. But yeah, I was surprised that, he didn't get down on one knee, but I guess it just wasn't meant to be.
I wasn't surprised that he didn't propose, especially as the episode went on. I feel like we were seeing all the wrong emotions from him. There wasn't this confidence, there wasn't this excitement, love in the air. Just as it went on, he just started to second guess himself more and traumas started to come up. And there was a lot of unsettled things that I think he needs to resolve within and their relationship that it wasn't looking like a proposal. I knew they would probably like obviously date and stuff, which I think is smart instead of immediately jumping to a proposal because you feel forced and you know it's not the right thing to do. So that's a very big personal decision to make, and I think it's okay that he didn't propose. I definitely looks like it was the best decision for him because if he did, this would be a million times worse. So I'm glad he trusted his instinct and went with no proposal at the end of the day.
Yeah, I am totally with you. I think hindsight is 2020. I mean, obviously he couldn't have predicted it was going to go in this direction, but I have a feeling he might be thankful that he didn't get down on one knee in that moment. Obviously, his conversation with his mom seemed to sort of really derail the journey, right? There was a point in time when, as you guys mentioned, all of us were pretty convinced, based on what we were seeing, based on what he was saying, that he was going to walk away from this engaged. Had they not had this conversation, do you think he would have gotten down on one knee? What I keep coming back to is I don't think Matt was willing to take the route of, I'm going to get engaged because that's what you do. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, right? You kind of brought this up, past trauma, his relationship with his father. He's not going to let, when he proposes to someone, there be a chance that it fail, right? That's not who he is. But had he not had this conversation with his mom that kind of reawoke that in him, could he have been swept up in the moment? I don't know. What do you think, Avery?
I think when he started the show, he had intentions to have an engagement at the end of this. But like I said, as things went on, I feel like he was second guessing himself and just asking himself, should I do this? And I think that conversation with his mom really was like the aha moment, like, okay, now I know what I should do. Mom's always right type thing. But I think that was something she did have to reiterate to him for him to kind of have that like aha moment, like this is what I'm gonna do. Had they not have that conversation, I don't know. He was seeming very unsure at the end of things. I would say maybe earlier on in the season, he was like, yeah, I'm going to get engaged. But I don't know. As things went on, it just was looking way less hopeful. What are your thoughts, Hibba?
I agree. I think what his mom said really, really stuck with him. And that just kind of like flipped a different switch on him, where all the insecurities and the uncertainties really fled into his mind. And I think that's what really caused him to not propose. Because I think really before that, leading up, to like fantasy suites, it seemed like he was having fun. He was in love. He was really just showing his personality a little bit more outgoing. But then as soon as that conversation happened, he kind of shut down in a way. So I think that kind of really honed in his mind that his relationship with his father, the way he grew up, what his mom just said, what her thoughts are of these women, it really, really put pressure on him. And I think he couldn't go through with it.
I totally agree with you both. Obviously, he had to do what was right for himself, go with his gut. I think, this was the best decision for so many reasons. Let's say none of the controversy ever happened, right? They had the best chance, in my opinion, of actually ending up happily ever after because he wasn't ready and he didn't sign on for something he wasn't ready for and then face all of the public pressure of being engaged and it not working out. I think that can be real curse for people in Bachelor Nation. So I am never really that upset when it goes this way. I know some people out there will disagree. But let's move on because, let's just face it. What we were all really looking forward to was after the final rose, and there's certainly a lot to unpack there. So let's jump ahead to after the final rose. Emmanuel Acho wasted literally no time calling out the elephant in the room. He definitely had those tough conversations we were expecting. First of all, we learned that Rachael and Matt are no longer together. So we went from not getting engaged, obviously planning to ride off into the sunset together, to present day, we now know didn't work out. Matt shared that he initially dismissed the controversy as rumors, that it was heartbreaking to discover that the noise was of course true. He said he had to check in with himself after she shared her apology with the world and reiterated to Emmanuel and to Rachael that it's time for her to do the work and that he really can't be a part of this journey, that this needs to be, her journey. He's not going to be involved. It's best for them to, be broken up. Are you surprised by this? I mean, what did we think going into the night? What did we think was going to happen when they sat down on that couch together? Did you guys feel like this is what we were expecting? Were you thinking it might go another way? Avery, how are you feeling?
I wasn't surprised. I was surprised by the part where he said it was heartbreaking to discover that the noise was true. Because in my mind, I was questioning, like, was she denying it at first? Or, there was picture evidence. So that was kind of like confusing to me. But in regards to the rest of it and her apology, I wasn't surprised by this, especially him choosing to keep his distance, not jump back into the relationship, because if he was to do that, his whole entire relationship would now consist of him educating her on all these things because she is dating a black man. And I think the most heartbreaking thing, like he said, was also explaining it to her on why like these things are wrong. And that makes sense why he doesn't want to be in a relationship with her, because that's no longer a relationship and that's not his job to do that. So he looked exhausted. I bet he's extremely tired. And, the vibes were low. It wasn't anything positive other than people getting answers and clearing the air. But I wasn't surprised by this. He just seemed absolutely over all of this.
I was gonna say that too. He looked mentally, emotionally drained from what this season put him through and what this current drama, controversy, Chris Harris and Rachel, all of that put him through on top of this season wrapping up. And he definitely had honest conversations and all the right questions were asked. And you're right, you're completely right, Avery. It is not his job to take Rachel under his wing and like explain to her the history and everything. It's not his place at all. And he also said that he didn't want to explain his blackness to her. She didn't understand his blackness. So I feel like that is a huge issue that needs to be addressed in order for this relationship to even survive or to be salvaged or to even continue. So I think Rachel just really needs to take time for herself and really reflect this whole experience, what she's done in the past, what she did in 2018, because we also need to realize that this is something that just might have been public. I mean, there might have been other instances which there isn't any photo evidence, there isn't any other video or, just solid evidence that we might know of. This is just that one instance that had, you know, that just went completely public. So you just never know. And again, I think Matt handled himself really well and answered all the questions to the best of his ability to really justify the reason that they didn't end up working out.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you both mentioned, there were some tough vibes going on. There were a lot of long pauses. And I thought it was actually really great that they let those pauses, ride out unedited, because it really made it clear to everyone the energy, the feelings, the emotions behind the silence. Of course, I think it was obvious to anybody watching that Rachel and Matt were both clearly heartbroken. It wasn't like a one-sided thing. They each looked absolutely devastated. But certain moments were more tense than others. Avery, you already touched on this a little bit, but Matt made it crystal clear that what was the most disappointing to him, what he couldn't seem to really get past, is that, and Rachel has owned this, right? I'm not saying this is like we didn't know. She's owned the fact that she was ignorant, but having to explain to her that her actions 3 years ago were ignorant seemed like the straw that kind of broke the camel's back. It wasn't something that she inherently had understood, grown from already. There wasn't work that had already been put in from this moment, is what I sort of inferred there. The work is really starting for her now. And that's a huge journey that so many people in this country are hopefully going on, if they haven't done it, up until this moment. So what did you make of that? I felt like it was kind of a brief thing he said, but I think it carried a lot of weight. What did you think, Avery?
It carried so much weight. And Rachel being, a white person going to date a black person, if you don't know basic history, then you don't know so much more. You don't know about systemic racism. You don't know what it's like to be black in America. And you have to know these things if that's going to be your partner, because then the partner has to take on the burden of educating her. And that's not the relationship. That's not what it's supposed to be about. And, especially with the whole antebellum Old South thing, that should have been basic history. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't learn that. And especially depending on the area you grew up in. So there's so many deeper problems. And, with proper education and understanding, this could have all been avoided, but this is the world we live in. But people need to know that. And it's crazy to think that she didn't understand that that was the issue at first and that's why they were breaking up. She was really kind of like blindsided, like, okay, well, what's the problem? Like, things were going well for us. Why is this putting an end to our relationship? Which, if you think about it, is really crazy because that means there's so much she doesn't know. But that's really sad, especially on his end, having to figure that out. And that being said, I know in his mind he was like, I no longer can do this.
Oh, I totally agree, Avery, and really well said. It is not Matt's duty at all. It's not the type of relationship he signed up for, you know? So I think Rachel, like we said, really needed to take this into her own hands. If she really wanted to learn, if she really thought she was ignorant, then she would take the time to learn and get proper resources and talk to people with real conversations that have dealt with racism and systemic racism as well. And it also was kind of shocking and interesting to hear when Emmanuel asked her if she ever thought in the back of her mind about these photos surfacing, and she said it never crossed her mind. And it really shows you how out of touch she is or was at the time, and just really just the amount of work that needs to be done. And again, I do not put that pressure on Matt to teach her. It's not his place and it's not his journey. It's Rachel's journey. And I think we just really need to keep that in mind, that Rachel is the one that should be proactive, and she can say all these words, but it really comes down to the action. So I really hope she takes away a lot from this whole experience.
Absolutely. And, she did apologize, of course. I mean, she apologized for a lot of things. One of the things she apologized for was not recognizing how much pain he must have been in to have ended the relationship. She kind of touched on clearly her initial reaction. She regrets whatever that was. They didn't exactly elaborate on the details. But I'm inferring here, I'm just speculating. It feels like it might have been rough. You're apologizing for not only the actions of your past, but also your actions in the breakup. It felt kind of loaded. And, for as cordial and amicable as the whole thing was, considering how tough it was, there were some tense moments. One that stood out, I think, was when they were prompted to share one last embrace, and they chose not to.
Well, if you all want to share one final embrace.
It was very icy. It was awkward, to say the least. What did you guys make of that in the moment? Because I think it kind of set the tone, at least for me, that, this is not in a great place. What did you think, Hiba?
It really isn't in a great place. And I think it also explains the long pauses as well as not wanting to embrace. It's because these wounds are still fresh. This controversy is still kind of unraveling, and we're finally getting to hear their side of the story from both of them together on a sofa, broadcasted everywhere. So it's still unraveling. We're still getting that closure. We're still hearing their side of the story. So I respect that Matt didn't want to get up and embrace her and act like everything was okay, because this is reality. This isn't a controversy of, oh, Rachel might have had a secret boyfriend. This is an issue of racism that was linked to the relationship and unconscious racism that occurred in her past. So I thought that was a really telling and very powerful moment, I have to say, that they didn't embrace, because again, this is very new, this is still fresh, and she has a lot to learn.
I completely agree with you. I feel like Matt kind of even set the tone from the start. He seemed very distant, kind of standoffish. He didn't want to explain a whole lot in terms of this, only the stuff that really mattered. And when they asked for the moment of embrace, especially following all this tension and silence, it's just like in the back of my mind, I know producers were just like pushing, like, let's have a nice moment of embrace at the end
Mhm.
and come together after this discussion. But there's nothing to embrace. That's not really necessary. That's not very natural. And I completely understand why he didn't want to do that. That was not the vibe. He was not feeling that. And good for him for not doing that, because it's just kind of unnecessary and that would have been very forced. So I wasn't really surprised by his actions.
No, I'm totally with you both. Matt did say that his feelings didn't go away overnight. When asked if the door was closed, he did a careful dance. He didn't say, like, hard pass, no, never again, right? He didn't, like, kind of reject her to her face and to all of America, but at least from what I picked up on, the door is, like, closed. Maybe you could kick it open really, 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 really hard if you tried, right? The vibes were not good there. We didn't feel a lot of spark, a lot of energy, a lot of hopefulness. I think, there's mixed opinions on this as well, but I think he did a pretty good job as the Bachelor. He handled drama pretty swiftly. He listened to the women. He was vulnerable, right? Like, all things considered, he gave us pretty much what we asked for from these leads. It's sad to see his journey end in so much pain. He did say he has no regrets. Do you guys have any final thoughts on his journey? I mean, my heart's just kind of broken. How do you feel, Avery?
In terms of being the Bachelor, I think he did everything right. He wasn't problematic with his personality. He was respectful. He was open. He was himself. But especially with handling everything else that came with this and being the first Black Bachelor and all this drama, he still carried himself, period. I feel like if all this weight was on me, I'd absolutely crumble. And then one thing after another is coming out, and he fell deeply in love with this person, and it's kind of turned into his worst nightmare. And I do feel like he still has feelings for Rachael, but he knows at the end of the day, regardless how much love he has for her, it literally can't work for all the reasons we just explained. And that's probably weighing on him so much, and just everything else following this outcome. So I hope for the best for him. I hope he gets a lot of rest and just kind of doesn't have to talk about this for a really long time, because you could tell he just showed up to this and wanted to get it over with. This has been going on for what feels like ever. So I'm glad it's finally an end is here, and the man can just take a break and breathe, because at the end of the day, he did nothing wrong. He got the bad end of the stick, and it turned into his worst nightmare. And that wasn't how this was supposed to be. He thought he was going to go on the show, have fun, travel, get married, and he ended up having to carry a burden and speak on things that he shouldn't have to, and then kind of bring up all these other things to light, which is great. I'm glad we got good discussion and education out of it. But in terms of him being happy, I hope he can just find love and just take it easy, lay low after this.
Oh, 100%. I echo everything you just said, Avery. And I believe Matt feels 100 pounds lighter, I'm sure, after this finale has aired. We've heard his side, we've heard Rachel's side, we've heard everyone's side. The season has wrapped up, everything we've seen it play out in the public. And I just really hope that he obviously learns from all of this. Not that, again, he did anything wrong, but just, the experience, the situation that he was put in. And he was dealt the most horrible cards in Bachelor Nation, I believe, but he handled it still with grace. I mean, he had to handle the toxic environment, and then the mean girls, and then Rachael, and then other girls coming in, and Heather and Michelle, and all those other rumors with Brittany being an escort, etc. I mean, this guy was thrown so many curveballs and so many hoops, and he did so well. And unfortunately, even though it didn't play out the way we wanted it to with an engagement. I mean, it seems like he dodged a bullet with Rachael in the long run, with everything, controversy unfolding, all of that. But it still seems like, what, he will take away something from this, and so will America, with these uncomfortable conversations. And unfortunately, it didn't happen in the most graceful way, but it happened. And unfortunately, the season wasn't perfect, but yeah, I feel like there always has to be like one bad season, but it just seems like he got the short end of the stick, unfortunately.
Well, like I said, he doesn't have any regrets, which is beautiful. After all of this, he's still, able to look ahead, see the glass half full, which I think is why we all love him. You guys, there were, as we've sort of touched on here, a lot of tough conversations. And after the final rose, we're going to go a little more in depth into some of those talking points, the Michelle of it all, the Bachelorette announcement, in a separate recap video where we talk all things after the final rose. So if you want to check that out, a link will be in the description. It has been an eventful season. We want to know your final thoughts, your final take, any opinion, throw it at us. Let us know down in the comments. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell because we will keep you updated on all things Bachelor Nation. As always, I'm your host, Fiona Zaring. I was joined by the wonderful Avery Grooms and Hiba Berry. If you want to come say hi, our social handles are on the screen right now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.